What is the objective world? What is it really? I say the objective world is simply made up of the axioms upon which infinite consciousness places upon itself so that it can play in the game and on the canvas of life. People put so much emphasis on the objective world, that is what is true. And that the objective world exists without consciousness. To me, this is absurd. To me, the objective world is made of consciousness just because it has rules, and just because it remains when you're not there, or when I'm not there. That does not mean that it's not made out of consciousness, that there's something called material or materialism that exists prior to consciousness. That's not necessarily what that means. To me, what I believe it means is it's actually a much grander part of your psyche. It's a much grander part of who you really are, who I really am, who we all are. We all fall under this certain paradigm, this certain rule set, going back to the axioms. Because consciousness is infinite. Consciousness has no limits, but the thing about having no limits is when you have no limits, it's like having all limits. When you have absolutely no limitation, nothing gets put onto the canvas. Nothing can you see, nothing can you smell, taste, touch, hear, nothing can you experience. And by the way, our five senses are simply also limitations that consciousness has placed upon themselves, upon itself. They're cones of limitation. Cones of perception, yes, but also cones of limitation. For there could be an infinite number of kinds of senses, but we have chose here as humans to have these five. Consciousness is infinite, but in this life, at least right now, right here, we have these five. And possibly more, but commonly recognized as these five. And so the world, objectivism, all the rules of physics, the reason why things work the way they work, the reason why science is the way it is, all has to do with the limitations that infinite consciousness has placed upon itself in order to have an experience. That's my belief. Because I don't want to be bound by some higher force that is out of my control. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Because if we're all one, which we are, because all things are connected, you You can't have a group of consciousness over here and then a group of consciousness over here. Like, consciousness just spreads everywhere. So if this was ever the case, then you'd ask, what is the space that is holding these two separate things? And the answer is always consciousness. Maybe consciousness is not the right word. Pure awareness, maybe even awareness is not the right word. But what I mean by these words is the essence of who we are. This undying part of us. That underlies all things. It cannot die. We cannot die at our essence. Our essence is eternal. So rest in peace with that. Rest assured is what I meant to say. Rest assured that that is true. You can believe otherwise, but I feel it's pretty convincing that this is true. And I would bet money on it. But yeah, so I think of consciousness as having like all these different domains, or as I called it, paradigms. These little sectors that all have their different rule sets. We're game designers, we're game creators, we're artists. A good artist knows to limit themselves, to almost give themselves a set of axioms or a set of rules under which they can play to make something beautiful on the canvas. And that's exactly what consciousness is doing on the canvas of consciousness, on the canvas of itself. Because it is itself, it can't know itself unless it puts limitations on itself. Because then it's just otherwise it's vacuously true that it just knows itself. But that kind of knowing, that kind of all-knowing is not the kind of knowing that comes from an experience within limitation. So that's my belief on what is the objective world, what is objectivism. I hold at the very core of myself that consciousness is what resides within, without, around all things. It is the makeup of us and everything. And I think a lot of people get really confused that there's some sort of objective world that exists prior to consciousness, that consciousness somehow emerged out of it, or something or other of that sort. And to me, this just makes absolutely no sense. This makes absolutely no sense. Yeah, the objective world has rules. It has, patterns that are recognizable and repeatable in science. Yes, this is all very true. And yes, some people can confuse themselves, right? Thinking, if we're the creators of our own reality, some people can, live in fantasy. And then they're living in fantasy. And their fantasy is some kind of belief that is directly opposing one of the paradigms of objective reality. And so, to people who believe in materialism, they say, oh, this person is being delusional, right? Because they have lost the truth of objective reality. They've lost the truth that there's something here that abides by certain rules that is not us. But I think that's just a misunderstanding of what is around us. You can still fool yourself with your small consciousness that you can do something that you actually can't do, because your bigger consciousness, meaning the world and the environment,